Thank you, everybody, for being here and for your patience, which we immensely appreciate. Almost every time we do one of these meetings with all these technical setups, I mean, not every time, but maybe 8 out of 10 times we have some type of problem, and often it's a new problem. So anyway, we got through that. My name is Valdi Wiederpass. I'm a volunteer. I serve as chair of Susquehanna Group of Sierra Club. Again, welcome to tonight's general meeting of our group. This will be featuring a presentation on the changing face of nature, and we are proud to be able to honor Rick Marsi by presenting him with our Lynda Spickard Environmental Award. First, I'll go through some announcements. So these meetings are free and open to the public. You don't have to be a member of Sierra Club to attend, but we encourage membership as it helps us by providing funding for our activities and lets us know your contact information so we can update you on important matters. The March edition of Susquehanna Sierra newsletter was posted to our website. You can go search for Sierra Club Susquehanna Group and you'll find our website. That has recordings of our past meetings for about the last 2.5 years, as well as newsletters, a calendar of upcoming events, and other information. We will consider stories for our upcoming newsletters, which you can email to Sierra Club Susquehanna Group at gmail.com. The next newsletter comes out in June. And if you want to have a submission considered for publication, please send it to our email by tomorrow, May 20th. So 500 words and some type of image or graphic, whatever you think might go along with your essay. So we've been working on the legislative session. We encourage people to contact their elected officials in New York State government to tell them that you want urgent action on climate change with a speedy transition to an electrified economy based on renewable energy. Contact the governor's office and also your elected New York State senator, as well as your assembly member. Coming events are on our events calendar. I want to mention that already something in progress is called the Binghamton Move Out Project. And the person I just called for help is the person that founded that. And the Move Out Project collects and saves items that college students leave behind when they move back home, to keep those items from being put into the landfill and just decaying and creating more emissions and filling up our landfill. And instead, they're collected, sorted, and then distributed to local charities for use by needy people. So that's a really worthwhile thing. And they've already collected 20,000 pounds this year. Last year, they collected 34,000 pounds. And they're hoping to beat that weight this year. And it looks like they probably will. So if you want to volunteer for that, we appreciate it. And if you're already volunteering, we certainly thank you. You can find information on Binghamton Move Out Project.org. Actually, moveoutproject.org is the website. Binghamton Move Out at gmail.com is where you can send an email if you got questions. Thursday, June 4th at 5 p.m., we have a wind farm visit coming up. This is to Bluestone Wind Project, which is in Windsor. It also straddles into the town of Sanford as well. That was built by Northland Power a few years back. It's been generating power for the grid and saving emissions. And Terry Stanley, the operations manager, is going to be our guide. So if you want to register for that to reserve your spot, please contact Scott Laufer. That's LAUFFERSCOTT at gmail.com. LauferScott@gmail.com. Let him know your name, email, phone number, and how many people will be attending with your reservation. And then we'll let you know by phone in case a thunderstorm is forecast. We might have to cancel the trip for that because it's going to be at least half of it outdoors. Okay. Then next month, our general membership meeting will be on the June 16th, again, the Tuesday, 7 p.m. And this will feature Jeremy Waddell a certified professional in erosion and sediment control with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition of Susquehanna River Basin Commission. He will be giving an overview of the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, their initiatives and partnerships, and he's going to cover receiving the SRBC East Branch Nanticoke Creek Climate Resiliency Project grant that will allow them to create a nature preserve that they're naming in honor of Julian Shepard, who was a past chair of Susquehanna Group of Sierra Club and a long-time professor at Binghamton University. So thank you for bearing with me and being patient for all these announcements. Now we are very pleased to have Rick Marsi here tonight so that we may honor him with the Lynda Spickard Environmental Award. He's then going to give a presentation on the changing face of nature. Rick Marsi is a freelance writer, photographer, lecturer, and nature guide. Rick graduated from Colgate University and is a former Peace Corps volunteer in India. He also served as director of Broome County's Finch Hollow Nature Center. Beginning in 1980, Rick wrote a syndicated nature column for Gannett Central New York media every week for 44 years. That is a long time. As a writer for the Binghamton, New York Press and Sun Bulletin during that time, he contributed hundreds of outdoor and environment stories. During his tenure at the Press and Sun Bulletin, Rick won 12 Associated Press Writing Contest Awards, including first place awards for both column and feature writing. As a photographer and lecturer, Rick has given hundreds of slide programs on various outdoor-related subjects. He is a former first place winner in both the Outdoor Writers of America photo and writing contests. His photographs have appeared in Sports Afield, Men's Health, Birdwatcher's Digest, Birder's World, Reader's Digest books, and other publications. He lives in Vestal, New York with his wife, Jan. They have 2 adult children, Stephen and Kate. The Lynda Spickard Environmental Award has been given out since 2005 in honor of Sierra Club member Lynda Spickard, who passed away in 1999. Lynda was an inspiration for her dedication to the environment, and the award is given each year in her honor in recognition of local environmental advocates who have made a significant difference in our community. And I want to mention that Rick's mother, Harriet Marsi, was the second person to receive this award. So this is like a big circle coming around to honor this young gentleman who is following in his mother's footsteps so well and admirably.
And the first person to receive it
is right there, Chris Berger. Yes. So thank you for being here. So this year, Sierra Club Susquehanna Group has chosen to honor Rick Marsi by presenting him the Lynda Spickard Environmental Award in recognition of his decades of helping people in our community learn to appreciate nature and inspiring them to protect it. The inscription on the award, which is a hand-painted stone created by a local artist, reads, "Recognizing Rick Marsi, naturalist, author, birder, and photographer, urging folks to take a walk, look closely, discover wilderness near home, inspiring us to explore, enjoy, and protect it." Thank you very much, Rick.
so much.
You more than
It's a
deserve
real
this
stone.
reward. Thank you for everything you've done and what you're still doing. You're still putting out the ranger report,
Yeah, I'm still doing it.
and you're still leading walks in the woods so that people can
Still
learn
doing
to
it.
appreciate. And young people, even my kids probably saw you when you were much younger at the at that nature center,
Finch Hollow.
Finch Hollow, that's now been demolished, sadly. But we really appreciate everything you've done, and thank you for being here tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you. Well, a white-tailed deer doe has looked like this for a very, very long time. So in many respects, we kind of think of nature as immutable, unchangeable, always the same. But as we all know, since the beginning of time, at least human time, human beings have altered their environment, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. We'll take a look at some of both tonight. Absolutely crucial to my take on nature and appreciating the outdoors is the fact that humans are inextricably connected to nature. So I'm in a beautiful hemlock ravine here, and I have a tripod, and I have a timer on my SLR camera, and so I can set the camera to take a picture in 5 seconds, and then after 5 seconds it goes click. So I took this picture, which is a very nice picture. It's a nice place. But then what I did was I came back. I actually didn't use the time release on this one. After I took this picture, I clicked the time release and I ran into the picture. And so it looks like this guy is exploring the great outdoors. And the reason I did that is to make the point that it's a much more involving photograph when there's a human being involved in it. And we are obviously part of the natural world. And that's been part of my pitch for, 50 years since I've been giving slide programs. Let's talk about some of the good things that people have done to benefit nature. Is that stupid icon in there? Yeah, zooks. Anyways, it says 50 million Americans feed birds. That's a lot of bird feed. And there's absolutely no doubt that feeding birds has made it a lot easier for wintering birds to survive. So our nuthatches and our chickadees and those birds that spend the winter here are documented to have survived the winter in better shape than they would have had we not been feeding them. The money is unbelievable, really, when you think about it. $4 billion every year spent in the United States on bird seed. These are beautiful purple finches. Male on the right looks like he's been dipped in raspberry sauce. The female on the left has a very distinctive white eye line that helps differentiate her from the house finch. And all finches have a very thick bill. Cardinals are finches. Rose-breasted grosbeaks are finches. Goldfinches are finches. They all have a thick bill for cracking open seeds. Cardinal is a finch. Bird feeding helps songbirds through our coldest winters. Bird bath like this is very, very valuable. Come summer, this hot weather changes everything. When we get into the dog days and all the summer streams are dried up, suddenly there's not water everywhere for birds, and that's when your bird bath or your water feature really does help them a great deal. When we bring birds to the feeder, we create a problem for them in that some of them fly into windows. There are bunches of methods. When I was first getting going, the decal was very popular. And this is a silhouette of a peregrine falcon, which is a bird-eating bird of prey. There are all sorts of decals still available now. Hummingbirds and sunflower seeds, and you can plaster them all over your windows, and they help break up the reflection that birds see of a forest, and thus they fly into it. But 1 billion birds a year are killed, and about 70% of them are in residences, and about 30% are in big buildings. So there are so many houses that's why that number is so high, because we've all probably had a bird fly into our window. Boxes for bluebirds that we get. Tree swallows. Some of us don't like tree swallows because they compete with bluebirds, but this works, and both methods are used. It's called pairing. If you have two identical bluebird boxes 10 feet apart on the same height pole, the tree swallows will take one of them and they will not let another tree swallow nest in the second one, but they don't care if a bluebird nests in it because these are insectivorous birds. They eat flying insects, and bluebirds go to the ground. If you watch them, they'll sit on a bean pole, then fly to the ground and grab a moth or an ant. So they're not competing for food. So that will work so that we can enjoy both of these beautiful birds. Just a side note, the tree swallow is, I think, the only songbird in North America whose wingtips exceed the length of its tail. You can see that here quite nicely. They have those sickle-shaped wings because they're beautiful, dexterous divers, and they have no bill. Look at the bill. But they don't snatch things. They just open their mouths up like Hoover vacuums and fly through the air, capturing things on the wing. Okay. These are positive things that we as human beings have done, but there are certainly other impacts that are on the negative side. Some of them we're not even aware of until years after that we do these things that we realize, whoops, there's been a problem with what we've done. We need to try to figure it out. This one is one of the biggest problems that songbirds face in our country and in the world. That's fragmentation of habitat. Of course, before these houses were built, this was an unbroken tract of, I don't know, 300 acres of forest. And before now there's a little hole, a little space between trees, and every house has a backyard. So the forest has been fragmented. What that allows is certain predators, crows, raccoons, possums, skunks, gulls, all animals that do not like unbroken forest, but love edges where they can go to the edge of the forest in a clearing and then make their way in there looking for, let's say, the nest of a wood thrush. Like a cowbird will not go into a dense forest, but if it has an edge, it will go to the edge and then go into the forest looking for bird's nests. And the wood thrush has been severely impacted by both just the fragmenting of a forest, because if you fragment it too much, a wood thrush will not nest in it, but also the introduction of these brood parasites, they're called, brown-headed cowbird. So this gorgeous bird, I hope some of you or all of you have had a chance to listen to the song of wood thrush. They like to sing it 5 a.m. in the spring and just before dark. And it's a cathedral-like, ethereal song that transforms the forest. If you want to get somebody interested in nature who is professes not to be, sit them down on a screen porch on an evening in June and let them listen to wood thrushes. Okay. We'll call this section adapting to what we've done in the man-made environment. And this is a classic, a positive that we never would have imagined when we started creating mountains of garbage that had to go to landfills. I'm not talking about the active landfill where there are thousands of ring-billed gulls flying around and the garbage trucks are coming with regularity. No, I'm talking about the active landfill. And if you know landfills, they're treeless, right? They don't let trees grow on them. They seed them with grass, then keep any woody vegetation off. So snowy owls are Arctic birds. They feed on lemmings. Lemmings are cyclical. They have rises in population and then crashes. When they have a lot of lemmings, the snowy owls in the Arctic are very successful in raising young. And then what happens is there's a bunch of young owls, and then the crash takes place. Lemmings drop off, and there aren't enough lemmings for the owls that are in the Arctic. And in the winter, they're forced to fly south. Where are they going to go? Do you think you're going to find a snowy owl in a 300-acre forest? They don't have any trees. they're gonna go to a treeless environment. And so if you wanna see a snowy owl in the winter, and they have these eruptions when the lemmings are, produce a lot of, owl chicks, then the lemmings fail, and the chicks have to fly south. It's called an eruption. And when that happens, the Broome County landfill provided this photograph. Who would have known that the honey wagon would be a great thing to follow on a winter's drive through northern Broome County? Well, I know because I'm a nature guy, and I know that, and I actually drove a farm haul tractor and spread the manure on a dairy farm for a couple of years while I lived on that farm. And when I was flinging that manure, I realized that it's loaded with hay seeds that are not digested by the cattle. So you fling that manure out, and there's all those seeds waiting for wild peas. One that I hope I will find, I go out looking, following trails, is beautiful snow bunting. Another Arctic bird that feeds on seeds, but if those seeds run short in the north, it will come down, and that's where I look for it. Also, the horned lark is another bird that that summer's north of here. It comes down in the winter. The horns are hard to see. They pop up like horns on a great horned owl, but here they're depressed because the lark is not stressed or anything. They pop up when he's feeling threatened. Anyway, just a beautiful ground bird. Now, there are certain birds that can adapt to change and certain birds that can't. And this is another problem for songbirds that humans have created, not really knowingly, and yet it's a serious problem. In 1900, let's go back 1900. If you took an aerial photo of Broome County, it would be all farms. Every hillside was cleared for farming. Of course, those hillside farms are hard scrabble, not the lush, loamy soil of the river bottoms. And so over time, in the 50s and the 60s, a lot of these meadows, which were pastures or even hay fields, were abandoned by farmers, and they stopped looking like this and started growing shrubs and trees. When that happens, you get birds, we'll see in a minute, who will abandon them because they're not pastures anymore. So this patchwork here shows you pretty well some grasslands that are still active. Now, if you are a farmer and you cut your hay once a year and you wait until July 4th to do it, you'll have nesting meadowlarks in your pasture. If you cut your hay on June 1st, you may kill the babies that are in the nest because they're on the ground. And we try to convince
You can
farmers to
spotlight
wait
that.
until they cut their hay. The same goes for
You can
bobolinks,
spotlight this.
which are more common. These
Hit
birds
that
are down.
three dots.
All grassland species are down because the habitat
Down.
is disappearing. So maintaining grassland is a huge priority.
I don't
Conservation
see spotlight.
throughout the country. This
Try
farm
pin.
has long been abandoned. When I took this picture. there
Well,
were,
then go back. Can you bring it up, double click it?
Both sparrowhawks, kestrels nesting in between the outer walls and the inner walls of this old farm. Even the kestrel, a beautiful little falcon.
Oh, here's a spotlight for everyone.
North American falcon, and their numbers are
Yeah, continue.
suffering, for a number of reasons. One is they eat insects a lot. They eat grasshoppers.
Fuzzy, but
Favorite food items, and of course, use of widespread use of pesticides and insecticides kills the insects that they need to eat for sustenance. Their habitat lost, they're grassland birds, so they've lost habitat, and they get starlings moving into their nest boxes and cavities, which also creates problems for them. I'm almost willing to bet that none of you have seen a barn out here recently. And one of the reasons is, again, habitat loss. They need meadows because they hunt rodents. And all the meadows, if they're still existing, have probably been planted into corn. Rodenticides. If, you know, there was an owl, famous owl in New York City a year or so ago that escaped from the zoo and lived for, I don't know, 6 months in Manhattan on rats. It finally ate enough rodenticide in the rats. Rats eat the rodenticide, they slow down before they die, easy prey, that gets into the food system of the owl. He flew in the window eventually, disoriented and died. And fewer barns. I was lying on my back in a silo in Owego, outside of Owego, when I took this picture of the monkey-faced owl. But they used to nest in belfries and in other old buildings which are disappearing rapidly. Fewer meadows, more forest. If you stop mowing your lawn today, what's it going to look like in 40 years? That. It only takes 40 years in Broome County for grassland to become a mature forest. So over time, all those abandoned farms eventually became forests. And from the picture that you took overhead in 1900, where there was no forest, and all the hemlocks were being cut for EJ factory tanning, you go take an aerial picture now, and 75% of our county and our state is forest land. So some animals are going to benefit, right? In 1920, there were no turkeys in New York State, wild turkeys, because they're forest birds. In about 1960, the DEC realized, wow, we're forested now. We could probably have turkeys. So they went to Pennsylvania. These cannon nets trapped a bunch of turkeys, brought them into the southern tier, let them go, and boom, they took right off. First 20 years they were introduced, no hunting. But after 20 years, they got to a point where there was a sustainable population so that a limited number of hunting licenses could be issued. Hunters could harvest wild turkeys and yet population would continue to grow. So that is really a success story, only due to changing habitat that humans certainly have an impact on. White-tailed deer, wow. Again, turn of the century, like into 1899 to 1900, you were lucky to see a deer in New York State. This is an animal that likes edges. This is not a forest animal. This is not a meadow. It's an animal of patchwork. Remember that farm I showed you, which had a lot of forest interspersed with meadow? That's what the whitetails like. So thus their numbers are increasing because the habitat they like is increasing. Also, of course, they don't have any predators anymore. In 1900, or let's go to 1850. In 1850, Broome County had cougars. In 1850, Broome County had timber wolves, keeping the population of deer down. Today, we have hunters. And yet, if you look at the number of hunters that are buying licenses every year, it's going down steadily. You know, I may be a hunter, but is my son a hunter? Probably not in this day and age. So there's no predation to control these animals. Thus, the numbers increase, and they run into cars at an accelerated rate. The black bear, the stats. In Pennsylvania, in 1970, which is 55 years ago, there were 4,000. Today, 18,000 bears. And that's one of the, again, when we weren't a forested state, we have bears. But as forests continued to grow, bears migrated up from Pennsylvania into our area in Broome County. Now we have approximately 7,000 of them. And you know the problem they have with people is in that all these birds, bears have an extremely good sense of smell. And so they can smell bird seed, they can smell it in a garbage can, they can smell your compost pile. So you really have to be careful at this time of year to prevent bears from interacting with people. Pesticides and herbicides, wow. This is a cornfield, it's next to the Shenango River. And this farmer did a smart thing. He maintained a buffer of vegetation between the cornfield and the river. If you go back to the 1950s, post-World War II, nobody thought about buffers. They wanted to maximize their cropland. And nobody thought that it would be a good idea to plant your corn in rows that were parallel to the river and not perpendicular to the river. So when it rained hard, all the soil from the field wouldn't run down those perpendicular gullies right into the river. So after World War II, the miracle insecticide, pesticide, DDT, was available to the public. It was in used in World War II to prevent malaria, fog spray, right? But after World War II, it became hugely popular with farmers because they would spray it. Crop dusters sprayed it, tractor sprayers behind the tractor would spray it, and it would kill all the insects. But when it rained, the DDT went into the river, it got into the bottom of the food chain, the insect larvae, the stoneflies, the mayflies, the crayfish, and then into the smaller fish that ate the larvae, got into them, and then it got into the bigger fish, and then finally, peaked the top of the pyramid, like the osprey, which eats the big fish, ate enough fish so that the DDT accumulated in its system, and when the female osprey went to sit on her eggs, the DDT had decimated the amount of calcium that she needed in her body to create strong eggshells, and she cracked all her eggs. And same thing happened with bald eagles. In 1960, after DDT, there were 70 pairs in the state. Now, the latest I read was 500 pairs. I think there are 500 pairs in Broome County. Every 100 yards on our local river seems to have an eagle nest on it. So we had to ban DDT. This is a situation where we didn't know that this miracle pesticide was going to kill these birds. But zero reproduction doesn't take long, does it? This is a juvenile bald eagle, by the way. They don't get their white heads and tails till they're 4 or 5 years old. These birds barely hung on. The osprey barely hung on, so it could be reintroduced a little more easily. Peregrine falcons were wiped out completely in New York State by DDT. This is a magnificent bird. It's a duck hunter, but ducks eat fish. Mergansers that we see in the river are fish eaters. So when mergansers eat the fish and the peregrines catch the mergansers, there it is in the food chain again. Historically, if you walked in the gorge at Susquehanna State Park before the 50s, you would see a pair of nesting falcons every year. Historically, they nested on cliff faces, and they're capable of diving at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. They're magnificent birds, but wiped out. So we had to go to Alaska, where DDT was not a problem. We had to catch chicks, bring them to Cornell, where they were fed by puppets, so they wouldn't imprint on human beings. And when they were adult, or they became feathered adults, they were reintroduced into not places like Susquehanna Park, but to places like the Verrazano Bridge in New York City, because it became obvious that these birds could adapt to artificial cliffs, right? I can remember this was all the Cornell, it's called the Peregrine Project or the Peregrine Fund. And Cornell worked really hard to bring back the peregrine falcon. And when I was working at the press, got to interview a peregrine falcon. And well, trust me, this bird was very grateful for the help that the peregrine fund in Cornell gave. So now we have almost 100 pairs in New York State, and they're back at Taucanic Park. So go to Taucanic Falls, walk the gorge, and watch and see if you can see these incredible diving birds with a strikingly forked wings. If you don't want to go that far, just go to the courthouse in downtown Binghamton. Because up in the corner there, there's a little decorative molding, concrete, that creates a platform. And for as long as I can remember, 30 years now, peregrines have been nesting. And I have a friend who works at Heman, Howard and Patel, the law firm on the 7th floor, and comes migration time in spring, he can tell what the peregrines are eating by the legs and the heads of the birds that he finds on the sidewalks. I said, well, the wood thrush came through last night, you know, etc. But mostly they eat pigeons. So they're now on buildings in Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and there are like 25 pairs in the New York City area. So we've pretty much, you know, righted the wrongs we did with DDT. We talk a lot about disappearing monarch butterflies. This is not as much a problem here in the Northeast as it is in the Midwest. Because in the Midwest, agriculture is king, and you have thousands of monocultured acres of corn and soybeans and wheat, etc. If you spray herbicides to kill plants that are not corn, you are targeting plants like milkweed. And so milkweed, which is the host plant of the monarch, they only will lay their eggs on milkweed. The larvae will only feed on milkweed sap and stems. If you kill the milkweed, you're killing off all the monarch butterflies. Plus the fact, these incredible insects migrate. They go to central Mexico, the mountains of central Mexico. You notice there aren't any here right now? That's because it's an incredible life cycle. They'll show up in like July, and they'll stay here until fall. Then our Broome County monarchs will migrate from Broome County to central Mexico, and they will hibernate in evergreen trees on mountain slopes outside Mexico City. What about if those slopes are not protected and they're logged? The wintering habitat of the monarch is degraded, and so will the numbers of monarchs. If they survive, they wake up in the spring, the females are already impregnated. They start flying back to Binghamton, but they get as far as about North Carolina, and they know it's their time. So they lay their eggs and they die. The eggs on milkweed turn into caterpillars, the caterpillars turn into chrysalis, the chrysalis hatches out adult monarch, and that adult monarch flies from North Carolina to New Jersey, where it knows, uh-oh, it's my time, I'm not gonna make it to Binghamton. Same thing, lays its eggs, the next generation goes through metamorphosis, and that monarch goes, you know, I've never been to Binghamton, but you know, something tells me I need to go. And it flies to Binghamton, and it arrives in July, and stays in July, and creates another generation of butterflies that will eventually fly south. If you spray insecticides on flowers to kill like a Japanese beetle, let's say you've got an insect pest on your roses or another perennial in your garden, and you give it a good blast of 7, and then the bumblebee comes along and tries to nectar in the flower that you just sprayed, not good for the bumblebee, not good for pollinators. The bumblebee is amazing. If you look closely at the salvia flower, not the purple part, but the base of the flower, you'll see that bumblebee uses a proboscis, like a nose, a sharp pin-shaped nose, to shortcut, not having to crawl into the flower itself, but drills a hole in the base of the flower where it can drink the nectar. Introduced species. This is rather amazing. Again, gone from New York, the moose. 1860 to 1980, no moose. Overhunted. not enough forested habitat. And slowly but surely, once that habitat started to increase, and one real important factor for moose was beaver ponds. Beavers, you know, when I was growing up, it was rare to find a beaver around here. But by the time I was a young adult, beavers were all over the place, and they still are. And beavers create wetlands. And if you've ever seen a moose in the Adirondacks wade up to its belly in a wetland and start eating all that succulent emerging vegetation, you know that's prime habitat. So now we suddenly started seeing moose coming down from northern New England and into New York State, and there's a stable population established in the Adirondacks. Coyotes, basically the same thing. In the mid-1800s, you couldn't find one. They were persecuted, that bounties were put on. But eventually, they started to move east from the northern Midwest. And they migrated over the top of the Great Lakes. And when they were migrating, moving east, they met up with timber wolves in Canada. And they mated with these timber wolves and created the eastern coyote, which is different from the western coyote, bigger. They can weigh 75 or 80 pounds. This is a western coyote that I photographed in Yellowstone. That's why he's not afraid of me, not running. You know, the Yellowstone animal. Same with that moose. That's a Yellowstone moose. That's not a New York State moose. New York State moose won't let you get that close. Anyway, their numbers are up. Now they're protected. They're a game animal. They used to be shoot them when you see them. Doesn't matter how many you can kill. Now there's a season on them. There's a limit on how many you can take, and their numbers are sustainable. We have lost wetlands. I talk about how many beaver ponds there are, and that's true. But 50% of our lower 48 wetlands have been lost since there were no people around. This wetland is dear to my heart. This is the Appalachian Marsh. And if you're driving, the road on the upper part of the photograph is Route 17 heading west from Vestal to Owego. And the road on the bottom part is eastbound Route 17, and the road below that is Route 434. This marsh was one of my mother's favorite places to go birding in the early 50s and all in the mid and the early 60s. And one day in 1964, she went to her favorite marsh, and she saw red flags and stakes right through the middle of this wetland. And there was a DOT truck parked nearby, and she asked what was going on, and they told her that they were going to build a new superhighway, Route 17, and it was going to go right, the westbound lane was going to go right through the marsh. Well, my mother, who was a delicate, wonderful lady, very nice, she went to Wellesley College, and she got a master's degree from North Carolina in botany, and she was a loving wife to Fred Marsi, who was an attorney in Binghamton. Her dander got up big time, and she decided she was going to convince the DOT not to do that. And to make a long story short, she convinced the DOT not to do that. And about a year later, after going to the DOT office in Corning and getting told that everybody thinks they're an engineer lady, you know, just let us do our job, she found that the stakes had been removed, and they were bulldozing the old rail bed where the westbound lane now exists. And she actually went out and talked to one of the operators and said, "Are you really not going to go through the marsh?" And he goes, "Lady, everybody knows you don't build a wet lake in the marsh." The New York Times did a story on that. This is Harriet's Marsh. When you drive west on 1786 and you get to the Hiawatha Golf Course, look to your left and you'll see Harriet's Marsh. We talked about how—
And that's why she got the award.
Well, that's part of it. A lifetime of, you know, if I start talking about Harriet, everything she did, we'll be here till 10 o'clock. Trust me. Wetland habitat is valuable, not just for ducks beavers create, why do they create dams? They create dams to build lodges in the middle of the dams, and the water around the lodge is a moat. So if you're a coyote and you want to eat a beaver kit for dinner, you're not going to probably swim 50 yards from the water to get to it. So they create this watery habitat. And when they do that, they're not really aware that they're creating a habitat for all sorts of biodiversity, right? Everything from, well, what happens in a beaver pond, they flood a stream, and there are forested trees on either side of the stream. All of a sudden, those trees are flooded, and if they're oak trees or ash trees, they can't live underwater, they die. And when they die, who knows, great blue heron might build a platform nest on one of those dead trees because it's in the water, and it has a moat around it to protect from raccoons and other predators. In early spring, we have millions of migratory birds passing over Broome County. There is a website, God bless Cornell Lab of Ornithology, please join. They're an incredible group. They have a website called Birdcast. And you can go on Birdcast and you can see how many birds migrated over Broome County last night, or how many are predicted to migrate over Broome County tomorrow night. A lot of it is the wind patterns and the like, cold fronts and the like. And you would be just stunned to see the number of birds that pass over our county on a good night with a strong south wind. Some of those birds are going to get tired and they're going to plunk down to rest and feed. And if you're a hooded merganser, you're going to plunk down on a wetland. If you're a migrating harrier, they used to be called marsh hawks, you're going to look for, again, a wetland area that has no trees where you can maybe fly over the cattails and scare up a meadow vole or something like that. The vegetation in wetlands is, talk about biodiversity, they call this pickerel weed because pickerel are long, thin, predatory fish related to pike. They eat minnows, and they know that the minnows are hiding in the pickerel weed, so they will find their food in there. If there was no pickerel weed and the bank of the lake or the wetland was bare, there'd be no place for the minnows to hide, and the whole food chain would be disrupted. Dragonflies lay their eggs on the beaver pens on surface. Ever seen a dragonfly female dip her ovipositor in the water? Every time she's dipping, she's laying an egg. The egg sinks to the surface. A wingless nymph emerges, stays in the pond for a year or two, feeding on other aquatic insects. One day it decides just not to be a nymph anymore, rises up, skin splits down the back, it crawls out, and this emerges. And the adult dragonfly, harmless to people, old wives' tales, they'd sew your lips shut on your ears and you told them, hi, that kind of stuff. Balderdash, they're harmless. They may land on you and starve you, but that hardly ever happens. Anyway, they eat thousands of mosquitoes. All they eat is flying insects. It's good to have a wetland. Turtles thrive in wetlands. This is a baby painted turtle. He's no bigger than $50. And I think because he's a baby, he didn't know that I was a human. I didn't know what I was, so I was able to edge the kayak right up to him and take this picture with my cell phone. Beautiful. Anyway, wetlands are good. We know now Ducks Unlimited is a hunter organization, but they're also conservationists, and they have protected millions of acres of wetlands in the United States. So good for us people for doing that. Okay, we talked about migratory songbirds, and they face a gauntlet of challenges. It's amazing to me that those millions of songbirds make it back every spring, even though the number of songbirds is down dramatically. A recent study showed that 25% of our songbirds have been lost in the past 50 years in the continental United States. 25%. for a variety of reasons. We'll talk about them now. Just a few days ago, the scarlet tanager showed up in my woods. Miracle of miracles, because this guy spends a winter in Colombia, South America. He's got to fly from here to Colombia and then back, about 5,000 miles, maybe 6,000 miles. And on the way, he's got to avoid running into buildings. He's got to avoid peregrine falcons. And just the number of attempts, he's got to avoid flying into windows. Number of challenges that these songbirds face are amazing. The two biggest challenges, I'll put three, to songbirds if they're migratory. One is habitat loss here in the States. You think about every shopping mall used to be something natural, maybe a wetland. Habitat loss. Another huge one is your pet cat. 2 billion birds killed by cats a year in the United States. 2 billion. 70% are feral cats, wild, cats that have gone wild. But 30% are your pets that you let out to hunt and then come back home with a mouse or a bird dropped in the window. This guy, most beautiful cat ever asked to own, and we did own him for 15 years, never saw the outside. He had a nice screen porch to watch the birds, but he had a happy, normal cat life, living as an indoor cat. So just a thought, it's a huge problem. We'll talk about the third problem, which is what happens in the winter when migratory birds get down here. Okay, towers, we got plenty of them. TV towers, cell phone towers. And on one of those nights that 4 million birds are passing overhead, if you go to the base of these towers, you're going to find dead warblers and dead vireos that have crashed into them. You're going to visit, Sierra Club's going to visit a wind farm. Renewable energy. Of course it has its challenges, and birds are one of them. 500,000 birds are killed by these turbines. And yet, they're figuring out how to ameliorate these problems. Now, how does Birdcast know there are 4 million birds overhead? They use radar, and they can track the movements. So if you're running one of these stations, or you're running a station and you're hooked up to an Audubon Society, and they're monitoring the birds on radar, you'll get a phone call that says, tomorrow night is going to be a massive migration right through where your turbines are. Please shut them off between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. That's when the birds are going to come through. And that has been done and with great success. Of course, we know where the migratory birds are, so why are we going to build a wind farm and a major migratory route for songbirds? That's just asking for trouble. So we plan ahead. Another possibility, migrants, as you can see, are the majority of the birds that are killed. If you paint one of these blades black, reduces collisions by 70%. When you go to see this wind farm, ask them about this, because you all know this wind farm. It's at the top of Tuscarora Mountain on Route 17, if I'm not mistaken. You can see the turbines, the blades, as you're heading east toward New York City. Why not try painting one blade black? Solar is another really good way to cut down on CO2, and yet it takes up land. And I've seen plenty of solar farms on hillsides, but the best place to build a solar farm is on a flat farm field. We all want to be self-sufficient. And in this political climate, there's more and more pressure to grow our own food. Well, if you build a solar farm here, there goes 100 acres of potential cropland. So it's a consideration to think about trying to not always pick most fertile agricultural land to site your solar farm. Now, when these birds go south, they are facing major habitat loss as well. a lot of them go to the Amazon basin, which is basically the Amazon River floodplain, which is not just Brazil, but it's Peru and Ecuador. It's a massive ecosystem. And it would be the world's ninth largest country. The tanager I talked to you about, he goes down there. He's in the floodplain or the watershed of the Amazon. The beautiful red-eyed vireo, which has also come back to my woods just recently. He's in Brazil, and the tropical forests where these birds winter are disappearing at a dramatic rate. Logging, mining, and agriculture are really the main culprits in the disappearance of tropical forests. In the blink of an eye, every second, 1.5 acres of tropical forest is destroyed. I once I'm on a horse here, and we're in Ecuador, in the Andes of Ecuador, in the Amazon basin, or at least the floodplain. And these forests, these hillsides used to be totally covered with tropical forest. And now they are denuded of forest. And the people who live in these small villages that we were visiting are small farmers, 5 acres, 10 acres. But multiply that by thousands of people, and you have a totally deforested habitat that no scarlet tanagers can spend the winter in. Slash and burn. Now, these small farmers will burn forests like this so that they can plant crops. Problem is the tropical soil is thin, and after 2 or 3 years, it's played out. You have to go burn another 10 acres. Now, you compare that small farmer to the massive Dole Pineapple Company, or which can clear hundreds and hundreds of acres to plant, in this case, bananas in southern Costa Rica. That's a desert. No songbirds are going in there, that's for sure. They use insecticides on the bananas, put these bags of insecticides. It's not good for birds. Other threats to bird life, invasive species. We've got plenty, don't we? But with the travel that people have around the world, we can't keep invasives out. There's just too much interaction. Mute swans came from Europe. People who brought them here and thought, oh, they look so great in the park in London. They'd be nice here. Problem is, when they're here, they won't let any other waterfowl anywhere near where they want to nest. Plus, they tear up vegetation by the roots. And as a result, it's now the conservation departments are trying to destroy mute swans by collecting their eggs and destroying their eggs because they're an invasive. They're bad for the environment. Tartarian honeysuckle, my God, along with the autumn olive, which is both are blooming now. If you're walking around, you have a sweet smell that you're getting. It's either from honeysuckle or autumn olive. Problem with these is they are invasive, they take over, and they displace other native shrubs. Birds will eat the berries of honeysuckle, but the nutrients aren't as rich as the shrubs of wild plants that have been crowded out by these invasives. Wildflowers too. I can remember 30, 40 years ago going to Montezuma Refuge in Seneca Falls, covered with purple, gorgeous. These are lovely plants, but deadly. They crowd out really valuable wetland plants like cattails, which are valuable as food for muskrats, for example, but also provide cover. And again, the black swallowtail can drink the nectar from the loosestrife, but it would be far better off if it were a native plant and not an invasive like knotweed. You travel our river basins now, Susquehanna, the Delaware. You drive down Route 17 toward Hancock, or you're driving between Deposit and Hancock. You've got good looks at the Delaware River, covered bank to bank in knotweed. That is displacing valuable native plants. This is not a new phenomenon. You're old enough, some of you, to remember elm trees. The Leroy Street downtown on the west side of Dayton was lined with these gorgeous V's or vase-shaped elms that would create a canopy tower over the street. It was absolutely beautiful. And a fungus came over from Europe in 1930 and eventually killed all the adult Dutch American elms, and they're still struggling terribly to try to figure out hybrids that will be immune to the fungus, because the spores are in the environment forever now. The only mature, beautiful elms I've seen recently, and I have seen a few, are in isolated areas where they're so far from any other elms that the spores can't get. We know the planet's warming. This stat sort of scared me. There were 150 glaciers in Glacier National Park in 1910. They'll be gone in a decade or two. When they melt, glaciers, sea level rises, right? And we all know what that problem can create with our coastal cities. Planet's warming, right? As it warms, birds that are in Broome County, because the temperature is just right for them, may find our warming county, i.e. today, 86 degrees when it should be 66, too warm. So the white-throated sparrows that we see here in spring may move north. They nest now in the Adirondacks. Maybe they'll have to move north into Quebec and Ontario to find bio zone that they prefer. How would the Adirondacks be without common loons? If we continue to warm our planet, these loons may just abandon the Adirondacks and move farther north. As that happens, birds that are historically southern birds will find cold Broome County not so bad after all. There's a vulture called the black vulture. Close relative of our turkey vulture, but he has the black head, not the red head. He's got a short tail, so when you see him soaring, he looks different. Their numbers 50 years ago, 30 years ago, impossible to see one here. Now they're showing up in small numbers regularly. 30 years from now, they'll be just as common as our turkey vultures. The mockingbird, southern bird, never see him here, right? Slowly but surely, warming climate, you're seeing more mockingbird. Butterflies, this beautiful giant swallowtail. The first one I saw maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I couldn't believe it. It's bigger than our tiger swallowtail, and it's a southern butterfly. But hey, warming planet means changes in the environment. Okay, I want to end on a positive note, so I will talk about whales. A couple generations ago, boy, you could kill as many whales as you want. Any country could kill as many whales as they wanted to, and the humpback whale just about became extinct. And if there hadn't been an international understanding that this was going to happen, they would be extinct. You know, pros can tell individual humpbacks by their flukes, their tails. They have different markings on their flukes. They get barnacles on them, as you can see in different patterns. It's very, very cool. This is a humpback off Cape Cod. If you go to Barnstable on Cape Cod or Provincetown, in the summer, you can go out only about 15 miles, and there's a bank there that upwellings of cold water bring all sorts of nutrients up for these fish to eat. Humpbacks eat zooplankton. Plankton is a free-floating plant or animal that goes with the currents, microscopic almost. And zooplankton are animal planktons. So I'm in Alaska, and the Inside Passage, which if you ever have a chance to visit, do it. And if you ever have a chance to get off a big ship and get on a small ship and go away from main channels where you'd find Ketchikan and Juneau and those coastal towns. Get in, if you go east, there's a labyrinth of wilderness. And that's where I am on a relatively small boat in September. And the humpbacks are migrating south from Alaska. And I look out and there they are, sounding and spouting. And I look down, this boat's 50 feet long, it's not big. I look down directly to the sides of the boat, and I see these beautiful little birds called phalaropes. And they're in the shorebird family, but they live on the ocean, except when they have to breed. That's when they go inland. So they're already finished their breeding on the mainland, and now they're living at sea, where they live all winter long. They're about this long, 6 inches. And I'm watching them, they're right below the boat. And all of a sudden, there's about 100 of them. All of a sudden they take off. And where do you think they fly? They fly over to the whales. Because they know that when the whales die, they're not only, the whales are eating these tiny zooplankton shrimp-like called krill. Well, and they eat massive amounts through their baleen plates, sieves. But while they're diving, they're stirring all this krill to the surface, and that's what the phalaropes eat. So it's the ecosystem is working very, very well. At one point, we were fortunate enough, we were on that 50-foot boat, but we had 2 14-foot boats with outboards that we would go out during the day and explore. And at one point, we came upon sleeping whales. They're mammals. They have to sleep on the surface. It was very foggy. We're able to get very, very close to them. Okay, well, we've gotten through this program. Sorry about the glitches. I really am. Sorry. I wish we could have gotten the Zoom thing together. But anyway, I haven't been doing this a very long time. And I'm proud of the work I've done. I'm very proud of my mother, who really, her shoes could not be filled. And I know my mom would be very happy to see this tonight. And I've always been a soft seller. I really appreciate organizations like the Sierra Club, activists, interested in the politics of the environment and willing to go to the polls and willing to pressure Congress people. That we have to do. Me, I've always my approach has been make them fall in love with the outdoors. Write a column that just takes them there. They can smell the flowers, they can hear the birds. Put them there, show them some beautiful pictures, so they want to go out and see these things. So my message has always been like, this is a gorgeous time of year, right? So you take someone out. Maybe they're not familiar with what a tanager sounds like. Maybe you'll even see a tanager. We did a walk at the Waterman Center in Appalachian on Saturday. We had spectacular looks at that crimson and black bird. You get a look at that, and you don't think you're enjoying the natural world, you're going to fall in love with it. And if you fall in love with it, that's when you want to protect it. If you don't care about protecting wood thrushes from fragmented forests. So if you love it, you want to protect it. So take somebody on a walk. Obviously, this is, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we all know that we're mortals on this earth, and we're not going to reverse aging, however hard we try. So what's the solution to keeping it going? Find a toddler, find a 6-year-old, find a 10-year-old, find a 14-year-old, and try to get them involved in the natural world. This is me and my grandson, who is now 6'1", but he loves coming to my house and has always loved coming to my house because he lives in a suburb in Connecticut, and I do not live in the suburbs. So both my grandkids love to come. And my son, this guy's father, grew up in one house for his whole life. He's 47 now. surrounded by forest. He got the bug from Harriet Marsi. And I'll never forget when he was at Vestal High School, he would come home from school, and my mother lived about 100 yards down the road. You had to cross the road on a slope, run through the wood. He would run, throw his books on the table, and run through the woods to the road. There was a ditch. He had to down the slope, over the ditch, across the road, and then run down another forest slope to my grandmother's house, where they would play Scrabble, and where he fell in love with my grandmother and the natural world as well. So let's work on that younger generation. Now, you always end the slideshow with a sunset, right? You have to. It's not sort of de rigueur. So I'll give you this Monterey picture from Northern California, windswept, beautiful, gnarly old thing. But here's the deal. I don't want you to walk quietly into the sunset. I want you to make some noise and make a fuss on behalf of protecting this environment. And if we all do that, we just might give this beautiful, big natural world of ours a chance. So that's my message. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for